Okay, class, lecture number 25. We only have one remaining lecture after today anyway. I hope you've enjoyed this course. It's been fun in a way, putting this out on video. But let's go ahead and get started in today's lecture. We've got a lot to cover here. The last time we were together, we were talking about the Renaissance period. You got familiar with such individuals as Raphael, he's a wonderful, wonderful painter. Also Michelangelo Buonarroti here, who was a Renaissance man that could do just about everything, as you well know. One of the things he's best known for is the painting of the Sistine Chapel ceiling, scenes of Genesis, if you will, from the year 1508 to the year 1502. A magnificent sculpture. I showed you a number of his works there. Pieta, Descent from the Cross, Moses, if you will, and I think his finest there, which is David, which you will be impressed if you see that. We also had Donatello with Gattamelata, and also David, the bronze statue of David. Renaissance architecture, and that, I think one of the best examples of that is St. Peter's Basilica, which is located in Vatican City. And then we talked about the Renaissance, moving to the north. This was a northern Renaissance. It was less secular, much more religious there. We talked about Christian humanism. Some of the individuals associated with that, Desiderius Erasmus, you need to recognize him, Sir Thomas More. Once you recognize both of those, we also talked about some of the artwork of that period of time. Hans Holbein the Younger, magnificent painter, one of my favorites, August Deer. And in the closing parts of the class period, we talked about the Protestant Reformation, which was an all-out attack upon the Catholic Church. This was instrumental in the works of Martin Luther himself, and we got a lot to talk about today with Martin Luther. I showed you a likeness of Luther the last time we were together. I'll show you several more likenesses of Luther, and very, very shortly. But Martin Luther was concerned about some of the basic practices of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Luther himself is a very religious individual. He prayed, he confessed constantly. In fact, at one point, and when he was younger, his confessor suggested to him, he said, you confess about some of the most trivial matters. Why don't you go out and commit adultery so you'll have something that you can really confess with that. And Luther was concerned about just some of the practices in the church, the offering of salvation for money, the offering and sale of dispensations, which I'll explain to you in just a little bit with that too. Corruption, fraud within the church. It was rumored at this time that the Renaissance Pope, Alexander VI, was having sex with his own daughter. And of course, I've got some basic problems with that. In the first place, where did the daughter come from? In the second place, why is the Pope having sex? And in the third place, why is the Pope having sex with his daughter? Isn't that called incest? And don't you go to jail for that sort of thing? All right, so anyway, that's Martin Luther here. All right, so let's go to our documents camera here, folks, and we'll pick up our lecture for today here. And I've already addressed some of these things here. Superstitions, fraud, corruption, salvation for money, offering salvation for money. And for many people at that time, they were concerned about the curative power of saints. Saints will heal anything and bring about just cures, help you, guide you through the day. For example here, if you have botches and biles, you should be praying to Saint Cosmos and Saint Damien. If you have bad eyes, if your vision is poor, you can say a little prayer to Saint Clare, and that will help your vision. Do you have a rotten toothache? Then you need to pray to St. Appleman. If you had the pox, you need to pray to St. Job. If you have sore breasts, there's no other person to pray to than St. Agatha. For those of you that have appendicitis, or you have abdominal pain, you have stomach pain, you should not hesitate to say a little prayer to St. Erasmus. Any of you had nightmares at night? If you have nightmares, you can cure those nightmares by praying to St. Raphael. Planning to take a cruise? You're going to go out on the Smith Lake or someplace like that? Then you should pray to St. Elmo to protect you. If you are a widow, you should pray to St. Paula. If you're worried about the Thanksgiving dinner, maybe you've already had Thanksgiving, but if you're worried about it and you're worried about the Christmas dinner, no other person to pray to than that of St. Martha. If you pray to St. Martha, then your Christmas dinner will melt in your very mouth here. Every day I get up, and as soon as my feet hit the floor, I say a little prayer to St. Bede. St. Bede is the patron saint for lecturers. If you're worried about astronomy, a comet hitting the planet, an asteroid hitting the planet, you should pray to St. Dominic. All right, they're also here relics, and these relics which would provide healing effects. And we do have some of those to this day. And the ones I'm going to give to you here, class, these are actual relics, actual holy relics here. I've talked to you about this a little bit at earlier times, like swatches from the swaddling clothes, splinters from the Holy Cross, that sort of thing too. But they really have it today in some of the churches, and I'll try to identify these. The breast milk of the Virgin Mary is present at the Basilica of St. Mark in Venice. I've been to that basilica on several occasions here, folks, but I never had the opportunity to look at the breast milk from the Virgin Mary. One of my students asked me a couple of years ago, I wonder if that milk is curdled. I have no earthly idea. And this is one that I find to be very special. The holy foreskin, the prepuce, the holy foreskin of Jesus Christ is present in the Palazzo degli Esposizioni in Rome. I have been by the Palazzo degli Esposizioni in Rome on several occasions. I never had the time nor had the interest to go inside that facility there and personally witness the foreskin of Jesus Christ. The baby tooth of Jesus is kept at the Saint Medard of Soissons. The crown of thorns is at the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. All of the thorns have been removed, and they are individual holy relics. Cloth dipped in the blood of saints is another holy relic. The finger of John the Baptist, I don't know. Cardinal's blood happens to be another relic. All right, now that was what Martin Luther was concerned about here. Let's catch ourselves up here. And also we have like the dispensations for money, and also selling of indulgences. Now here's what I'm talking about with dispensations. Dispensations is the lessening of the offense. And I'll use an example here in our society. Let's say, for example, and heaven forbid that you would do something like this, it would be really stupid, that you would take a pistol and go up to Quicksack and rob the Quicksack and take an undisclosed amount of money, and then you are, something just fell over in my office. I'm sorry to be distracted by that. All right, and then, so you're caught by the authorities. And if it was you and I, at least in Alabama, I don't know about in other places, but if you were in Alabama, you would probably get a jail sentence out of that, or maybe even a prison sentence out of that. But let's say, for example, here your family went down to the sheriff or went to the chief of police, and you paid several $100s, and we can now get that offense reduced to, say, pickpocketing, so you get a $25 fine. Or we'll say here that you're in the church, and you're a Catholic priest, and the Catholic priest fondles a little boy or a little girl, which was a very serious offense, but your family comes to your aid and pays money to the Catholic Church, and so your dispensation then will be, we're going to relocate you and move you to another church. All right, that's what I'm talking about with that, and that's what Luther was unhappy with here. And the other thing was the sale of indulgences. Now, indulgences here are like get out of jail free cards with that. And let's say, for example, here that we had somebody that passed away, and if they pass away, then your spirit, your soul goes to purgatory. But if, however, family members could gather a little bit of money, and we could give that money to the Catholic Church, then that deceased person's soul will springboard straight up into heaven with that. And those were some of the things that Martin Luther was particularly upset with. So let's go back to our camera here, folks, and let's see where we are. Okay, so it was assumed at that time that the Pope had a treasury of merits. Now, these are, see if I wrote it for you good folks, these are surplus good works that have been built up by the good deeds performed by Jesus and also by the saints. Now, and also about apostles here. So this means that it's like a treasure chest that the Pope has. And it's a big treasure chest, and it has all these good works, good deeds that have been performed. And if you perform a sin, if you commit a sin, then we can exchange one of the good deeds and exchange that for one of your sins. And so all is forgiven. All is forgiven with that. That is a treasury of merits. Now, for Martin Luther's approach to salvation differed considerably than that of the Thomistic approach. And this is Thomistic approach as designed by St. Thomas Aquinas. And let me help you out with this, and I'll go over these. And the first one of these, and these are three, God's saving grace is not irresistible. Humans may reject God and travel the road to doom. You can be a reprobate if you wish to do so. You don't have to follow in the path of goodness. The other thing here, the sacramental services of the church help human sinners improve their chances of salvation here. Or in other words, the more you go to church, the more you attend Mass, the more you read the Vulgate, if you can read the Vulgate, and the more money that you give to the church, and the more times you confess your sins, that improves your chances of salvation. And Luther had some big problems with that. And the third part, the clergy alone, this means the priest or the bishop, the clergy alone has the authority from God in forgiving sins and performing the Eucharist. In other words, the average individual like you and I, we cannot communicate with God. This is done so through the priest. It is done so through the bishop here. Okay, so let me give you some background on Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was born in the German city here, which is called Eisleben. He was born in the year 1483. You can go to that village today. It's not a very large town in Germany. And yeah, his house is still there, by the way, too. I have not seen that. He died in the year 1546 at the age of 63. At a young age, he was referred to as Marty. Now, folks, let me give you a little lesson in life. If you have a child named Martin, you call him Martin. Don't call him Marty. If you have a child named John, don't call him Johnny. If you have a child named Alex, don't call him Allie. If you have a child named Mark, don't call him Marky. If you have a child named Mike, don't call him Mikey. You won't even get his tail beat every day at school. Just call him by his right name. All right, now let me give you a little background information on Martin Luther here. Martin Luther attended, I think he was 16 years of age, attended the University of Erfurt. Erfurt's a large town in Germany. It has a large university, a very prestigious university. His father wanted him to go into law, but he disappointed his father very, very much here, and he went into theology. He went into divinity, and eventually earned a doctor of theology, and would later receive a teaching position, a professor position at the University of Wittenberg in Saxony province. All right, I'll show you some photographs of the University of Wittenberg in Saxony province very, very shortly here. But Martin Luther was concerned with his dilemma with the justice of God. And it had the appearance, to Martin Luther anyway, that God appeared to be unjust. He issued commandments that no one can keep, and then he punished sinners, punished man to eternal hell and damnation for breaking his rules. And one day, while he was meditating, in fact, he was meditating, and I'll show you exactly where it is here, folks. And this is referred to as the Black Cloister, and this is at the University of Wittenberg. Martin Luther was a professor of theology there, and he lived in this region right through here. Let me try to point it out here. He lived up in this region, or maybe it's on the other side, I'm not sure, but he lived on the, I guess it was the second floor there, with his family, later with his family, not at this time, because he was not married at this time, but he was meditating, and he was up in the Black Cloister itself, and he was reading in Psalms. Let's see if I wrote that down for you folks here, and apparently I did here, folks. But he was reading in Psalms, and in Psalms 71, verse 2, deliver me in thy justice. Deliver me in thy justice. When he suddenly realized that God's justice has nothing to do with his discipline. God's justice is his mercy in saving sinful mortals through prayer here. This is sometimes referred to as the Tower experience for Martin Luther. God's justice does not demand ever-ceasing good works and religious ceremonies. Humans are granted salvation by God's saving grace alone. And by 1517, Martin Luther began to openly attack some of the basic practices of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. Then on Halloween, the 31st of October in 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the cathedral door at the University of Wittenberg. And let me see if I can find that for you good folks here, and I'm looking around for it here, and I got it located right here. And it was, these are not the original doors here. The original doors later burned, and these are doors that replaced the ones that Martin Luther actually nailed, those 95 Theses, which were 95 objections to just basic practices in the Catholic Church. If you were in my classroom right now, I have a large poster, and I mean it's a very, very large poster, that lists all 95 of those theses. And I don't read those to the class, but I actually did have last year. I had a student that stayed after class and read all 95 of those, and I have to admit that I did not do that myself anyway. That is referred to as the beginning of the Protestant Reformation here. That's the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. And Martin Luther claimed that the Pope, the cardinals, and the priests, and the bishops are just ordinary men, that they have no supernatural power whatsoever. For the Pope at that time, did I write his name out for you here, folks? And the Pope at that time, let's go back up here, was Leo X, and he charged Martin Luther with heresy. And remember, Martin Luther is Catholic, by the way. Martin Luther is Catholic. Now, when these notes were written and posted on the cathedral door at the University of Wittenberg in Saxony Province, they were written in Latin. They were meant only for scholarly debate at the university itself here. But somebody took them down, translated them into English, and then used a printing press and ran copies of it so that the average German person could actually read that. Could read those. Okay, so Luther then produced 3 pamphlets. These pamphlets, which are referred to as Justification by Faith, Primacy of the Scriptures, and Priesthood of all believers. Martin Luther truly believed that true spiritualism can come only from a faithful congregation rather than from a society of ordained priests. All right, so let's move right along with this. And Luther broke away from the church, and he established his own church, which was the Lutheran Church. And it will become quite popular, particularly there in Germany. If you go to Germany today, you'll find Lutheran churches and Catholic churches, and I'm just guessing on this. I think they're about an equal distribution there. But you'll find Lutheran churches, just like Baptist churches here, just like Methodist churches here. Okay, so before we go any further with this, I want to show you a couple of photographs here. I'm going to let you kind of catch up when they're here. When you visit these German towns, don't be surprised here. Martin Luther is a very, very popular individual. Statues of Martin Luther here outside the churches here. That's in Magdeburg. Outside here of this church, you can see the statue there of Martin Luther. This is called the Frauenkirchen. It's a beautiful, beautiful church that's present in Dresden, Germany. During World War II, it was totally destroyed. Allied bombing totally destroyed this church, and it's been rebuilt, and a most beautiful Lutheran church. Okay, so shall we move right along here, folks? And let's give you a second to think on this. But these are beliefs that Martin Luther had as he broke away from the Catholic Church. And I'm just asking you, and that's what I do when face-to-face with my classes, I ask them, do you really think there's a purgatory? Do you really think that there's a halfway house that's halfway between earth and heaven? Where the soul can go for the atonement of sins here? And Martin Luther took the position, no. Do you really think that if you want to have a good Christmas dinner, that if you say this prayer to Saint Martha or Saint Paula, that you will have the meal will melt in your mouth? Do you believe that? And Martin Luther did not. Do you believe that fasting improves your chances of going to heaven? It might help you lose a little bit of weight, but I don't think it's going to improve your chances to go to heaven. What about taking a pilgrimage to go to Canterbury Cathedral? Will that enhance your chances of going to heaven and undergoing salvation? It might benefit from the exercise of walking 50 miles or something like that, but I personally don't think that it's going to improve your chances of salvation. What about the holy relics that we talked about a little bit ago? What about those holy relics? Do you mean that if you place that plastic Jesus on the dashboard of your car, that your chances of salvation will be improved? And Martin Luther rejected the idea. And what about monasticism? Monasticism. A group of grown men go out far from society and sit around and drink wine and beer and fast and work in the fields and pray all day. Does that help your chances of salvation? And dispensations that we talked about earlier, the lessening of the offenses there. Martin Luther was totally against that. And what about offering in the Catholic Church service the message at Mass and offering that in Latin when only a handful of people can read and speak and understand Latin? Does that make any sense to do that? or would it be better to do it in German? What about celibacy? Does that improve your chances of salvation? Celibacy? Human sexuality is a basic biological function, my friends, and Martin Luther rejected that idea. And what about marriage? What about marriage? Well, the argument is you're married to God. But isn't it a basic practice in human life to take a partner? And Martin Luther did, and I'll tell you more about that in just a few minutes here. And Martin Luther also did away with the title of priest. And now we're going to have the minister. And Martin Luther would stress that the minister is just an ordinary person and has no supernatural powers. And this is a big, big change in the Catholic Church. And I'm asking you folks, how do you think the Catholic Church reacts to this? They are losing all the money. They're losing their membership. They're going to the Lutheran Church. So it was a big transition for them. And for Martin Luther took a wife. And this wife's name was Catherine von Bora. B-O-R-A if you can't read my writing. And he took her as his wife in 1525. All right, so let me show you a couple of likenesses here. I've got a lot of visuals for you good folks here. Here's a likeness here of Martin Luther. Here, I think that was by Louis Cranach. I believe that was it. Here's a likeness of Catherine von Bora. Catherine von Bora was a nun, by the way, and Martin Luther, of course, was a monk. And they married. They had 6 children together. Had 6 children. And let's see if I wrote out the children's names here for you folks here. And one child was named Johannes. They called him Hans. Then we had Elizabeth and Martin. Paul was another one. Margaret and Magdalena. Those were the 6 children of Martin Luther. And I'm looking around for some things here, folks. And let's see what I can find here. And for Martin Luther was Martin Luther's personal church, where he delivered over 2,000 sermons. His children were baptized here. Martin Luther, if I remember right, was married here. This is referred to as St. Mary's Church. It is present in Wittenberg, by the way, just not very far from the University of Wittenberg. When you go into church, you can actually see the pulpit, which was, it's like a second story, but where the ministers of those times would deliver their messages, above the students, just like in the university professors. They deliver the lectures, of standing above the students, like on the second floor balcony here. And anyway here. Okay, so that's Martin Luther for you here. Oh, and by the way, I want to tell you, and maybe I'm stepping on some toes right here, but that's okay. Martin Luther liked to drink beer. I told you that before. He's a fat little German that likes beer. And would you guess who brewed his beer for him? And it was his wife, Catherine von Bora. And I'm telling you guys, if you ever get a wife that brews your own beer for you, that's a keeper. That's a keeper here. And I hope that didn't offend you too, folks too badly anyway. Okay, so Martin Luther. Let's move on here, folks. Now, the church is going to react with this. And Martin Luther's church, anyway, will react with this. And this is out of your textbook here. And you can read this. They're a 7-headed papal beast. And this shows you the Pope. And here's the Pope right here. And it says, money will get you a sack full of indulgences. That's in German. And it says, the reign of the devil. The reign of the devil. And if you notice below the Pope, we have the treasury of merits that's present here that is closely guarded by the devil himself. The devil there. That's in your textbook. And then we have the Catholic response to that, and they put out the 7-headed papal beast. 7-headed papal beast, or 7-headed Martin Luther. I'm sorry about that. And you can read this. It says, Dr. Martin Luther, heretic, Barabbas, and I can't read those. It's upside down with that too. But anyway, that was the response that we will have to that. Okay, so let's get that behind us here, and shall we press on here, folks? And let me see where we are here. Okay, Martin Luther also wrote, to the Christian nobility of the German nation. Let's get this back in place here. To the Christian nobility of the German nation. And when he made the statement here, if the Pope's court were reduced 99%, it would still be large enough to give decisions on matters of faith. We see that sometimes in our colleges today. If our administrations were reduced 95%, I promise you we would still be able to effectively conduct an educational course here. The Cardinals have sucked Italy dry, and now they turn to Germany. All right, here. As we move right along here, folks, in 1520, Martin Luther took a copy of the Catholic Papal Bull and the Church Law, the Catholic Church Law. Now, if you don't know what a Papal Bull or Papal Bullia is, that is an edict that comes straight from the Pope itself. And he threw both of those into a bonfire. And if you go to Wittenberg today, you'll be told that it was on this location here where that tree is, even though it's 500 years ago, that where that tree is located, that was where Martin Luther actually threw the Papal Bull and the Catholic Church Law into a bonfire. And I'm asking you good folks this, is that an act of heresy? And of course it is. So Martin Luther was taken into custody, and he was actually placed into custody of this individual, the Elector Frederick the Wise. Frederick the Wise has 17,000, if you can imagine, his holy relics, by the way. And he's a good guy. He's a good guy. Frederick the Wise, if you watch the movie Luther, you'll see that he's a decent individual. And for Martin Luther, placed in custody of Frederick the Wise, and Martin Luther, by the request here of Frederick the Wise, asked for an inquiry, where he could defend himself. Now, this is a little bit confusing here, folks, so I want you to pay attention to this now. Some of you may be familiar with it. It's called as you look at it, Diet of Worms, and that is not the way it is. In German, if you ever see this word here, it's pronounced Diet. And I'll give you some pronunciation lectures, guidelines later in German. But basically what it amounts to is that if you ever see I or E or I, it's always pronounced as a long second vowel. So it's Diet of, now this word here, which W starts this word, is W's are pronounced as V. So it is Worms. So it's the Diet of Worms, Diet of Worms. Now, a Diet is a hearing. So it's a hearing that takes place in the German city of Worms. Let me show you where it is on a map here, folks. Nice city, as a matter of fact. This is where it is located here. And it's present on the Rhine River itself here. But that's where the hearing would take place. Now, where Wittenberg is located, it's over here. So it is a distance away from there. Okay, so anyway, the deed of Worms would take place, and presiding over that will be, and I better go back to my camera so you can see the name here. Presiding over that, did I write it out for you here, was the Holy Roman Emperor, and I did not write it out here, the Holy Roman Emperor, who was Charles V. Charles V, who was a very, very religious individual. And as it turned out, Martin Luther was whisked away. He was taken away over to and hidden by Frederick the Wise in what was called the Wartburg, or Die Wartburg. And let's see if I have a likeness of it here as I'm thumbing through my book, trying to show you good folks where this is. And that is where it is today. Watch the movie Luther. It's located in Eisenach, Germany here, and that's where Luther was kept for the next year, kept in hiding, if you will. Ordinarily, Martin Luther had his hair tonsured. And what I mean by that, you keep it on the side, but it's shaved on the top. Here, sorry for the theatrics with that here. But at that time, he let his hair grow long. He took another name. He called himself Junker Jorg, which is Squire George in German anyway. And he stayed there for a year. And then after a year, he came out of hiding, went back to the University of Wittenberg, and discovered that everything that he had been advocating here had all been accepted by the university and the people in that community. It helped matters that for the Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V at that time, he was engaged in a number of wars, so that just took his attention away from Martin Luther. Okay, so Martin Luther was excommunicated by the deed of Worms in the year 1521. Okay, let's see here. How are we doing on our subject here, folks? All right, so Martin Luther, as I said earlier, came out of hiding. Now, I went to Wittenberg, and I went there in 2016. Now, if you paid attention to me a few minutes ago, the Protestant Reformation started in 1517. So I went there in 2016. Now, 1 year later, we had the 500th centennial, the 500th year of the Protestant Reformation. Now, the church here, the church where Martin Luther lies and rests today, is called the Schlosskirche. You translate that, that means like the castle church, the castle church. And I'm trying to find another photograph here. Here's another likeness here showing you the Schlosskirche. They have it in English here, the Protestant Catholic Church in Wittenberg. And I wanted to go to that church so badly. And in fact, the trip I made to Germany was based upon the hopes that I would be able to see the resting place of Martin Luther and be able to see, where he actually taught, actually visualized his own Bible here. And I did not show that to you a little bit ago. It slipped my mind. But when you go into the home there of Martin Luther, which is at the university, the old Bible of Martin Luther is still present there to this day. But it was very important to me to see where the final resting place of Martin Luther. And I was disappointed so much when it was announced, that the church was closed for the entirety of 2016. And it was closed for repairs before the 2017 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation would take place. And I was deeply, deeply disappointed with that. And so we went through all of our other tour at the university, Martin Luther's apartment, through St. Mary's Church and so forth. And the tour guide told us, he said, okay, here, folks, we're going to have about an hour here, free time. You can wander around the town and do whatever you wanted. And I remember that day was so blazing hot, and I was thirsty as could be. And so I told myself, I said, well, as soon as he releases us, I'm going to go over to a guest house that's like a pub, and I'm going to have myself a cold beer, and maybe even 2 cold beers, something like that. And then something just entered into my mind, and it said, well, why don't you just walk the quarter mile down to the Schlosskirche and just by chance see if it's open? And then the other side of me said, nah, that cold beer would surely be very good right now. And then the other side countered and said, you'll still have time. Just walk down there and see perhaps if the church is open. And I walked down there, and sure enough, there was fencing that was all around the church, no way to get in. And then workers went on a break. And when they went on a break, they opened the gate and they left the gate open. And there was 3 or 4 of us that were right there together. And we saw the chance, and we just made a dash over to the doors there and opened the doors and went right into the church there. And lo and behold, there was the burial site of Martin Luther. And that's what it looks like there. Frederick the Wise is buried there also. A couple of other very prominent individuals that I did not address to you good folks are likewise buried there. And I just thought, something just guided me. Something just took me down there to that church to see that burial site there of Martin Luther. And I'll never, ever forget that occasion here. Okay, so let's get back to our lecture here, folks, because I'm kind of running out of time here. So we're going to see the beginning of the Protestant Reformation here. Now, originally the term meant Lutherans who protest. Lutherans who protest. Those were the Protestants here. Later, Lutherans will be excluded from Protestantism. Now, in England, the church, it was similar to the Catholic Church, and it was called the Anglican Church or the Church of England. Now, a prominent individual at that time was a king of England. His name was Henry VIII. Henry VIII's reign went from 1509 to 1547. Henry VIII was the son of Henry VII. And Henry VIII was married to this lady here, and her name was Catherine. Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon. And I'm looking around for something here, and I'm not finding it, but I think I can find it. Catherine of Aragon. And Henry had been married to her for 18 long years. That's a long time to be married to anyone here. She had given him no male sons that survived. He had a daughter, and this daughter who was Princess Mary. But Henry knows that if he dies, then the throne will go to his wife, or it will go to his daughter. And he's not really in favor of that. And both his wife and his daughter are Catholic. So Henry didn't help matters, had his lustful eyes on a lady-in-waiting by the name of Anne Boleyn. Now, Anne Boleyn refused Henry's advances. She wouldn't have anything to do with him because Henry's a married man here. So Henry was kind of grasping at straws, like, how can I kind of get rid of Catherine of Aragon. Well, she's Catholic, and Henry at that time was Catholic too. Catholic Church does not permit divorce. So Henry was looking around and trying to come up with some way that he could get that marriage annulled. And sure enough, in Leviticus 20:21, it states in the Bible there that it is an unclean thing to sleep with your brother's wife. And as it turned out, Catherine had been briefly married to the brother of Henry before she married Henry. And that's the excuse that they're going to use here. The marriage should be annulled because it's an unclean thing. And when Henry went to the Pope refused to consider on that. And so Henry took matters into his own hands, and he declared himself as the head of the Anglican Church, then went to the Archbishop of Canterbury and asked the Archbishop here to annul the marriage to Catherine, and the marriage was annulled. And Henry, in turn, married Anne Boleyn. I'll write show her name out for you again. Married Anne Boleyn, and they got a daughter, and her name was Elizabeth, and no son. And so Henry accused Anne Boleyn of adultery and sent her to the Tower of London. And in the Tower of London, it's one of those places you check in, but you don't check out. And here's a brochure on the Tower of London there. And they removed the head, if you will, of Anne Boleyn. And then Henry married Jane Seymour. And when he married Jane Seymour, this was his third wife, she did give him the son that he actually wanted. It was a sickly little boy, and this little boy's name was Edward. And when Henry died in 1547, Edward became Edward VI. He was 9 years of age, and he died at the age of 15. And from there, we'll find that the Queen Mary, which is actually Princess Mary, she now becomes the Queen, and she restores Catholicism as the principal religion to England, and she persecuted many of these Protestants here, my friends. People called her Bloody Mary here. And in fact, she took the Archbishop of Canterbury that annulled the marriage to her mother and father, and she had him burned at the stake. All right, 1553 to 1558, and when she died, she was followed by the Virgin Queen, Elizabeth I. That was the daughter of Anne Boleyn. A very effective leader here. In fact, she's one of my favorite individuals, and I love Elizabeth I. 1558 to 1603, never married. So that's going to be the end of the line here for the Tudor family. She is a Tudor, as Mary was a Tudor likewise here. Okay, so let's move on. Some other Protestant groups that are going to emerge. We'll get these off our plate real quick here, folks. Everything we talk about today, one last thing we'll have to talk about during our next lecture. A small religion, difficult to pronounce here, it's called Zwinglianism. Zwinglianism. Have to work on your pronunciation. This religion was founded by Ulrich Zwingli. Sometimes you'll see that name as Ulrich Zwingli. But anyway, for Zwinglianism, they rejected Luther's ideas of the Eucharist as the real presence of the body of Jesus. And anyway, and another group we're going to have, I want to get this out of the way here too, a different group, which we call the Anabaptists. And this actually grew out of Zwinglianism. They believed that every person had an inner light that would move you along the path to righteousness here. They rejected the idea of infant baptism, and they believed that baptism should be reserved for when a person is an adult and not have like infant thinking with that here. All right, now for the Anabaptists, the Anabaptists actually stormed a Catholic city which was called Munster. And I don't feel like going back to my map here. If I get a chance in a minute, I'll go back to Munster and show you actually where it is. And they occupied, even though they're pacifists, they occupied this city for a year starting in 1534. But eventually a Catholic group will break into the fortified walls of the city, and they rounded up all the Anabaptist leaders here, and they took the three leaders here and tortured them for a period of time, then killed them, and then placed their dead bodies up in what was called the Anabaptist cages. Those are still there today here, folks, in Munster, in the Anabaptist cages, and there they would stay for years and years with their blanched bones, exposed to the public here. And for this group of Anabaptists, they will eventually disappear, and they will become absorbed into several other groups, such as what we recognize today as the Mennonites, the Quakers, the Baptists, and the Pentecostals there. Alrighty here, folks, let's go back to me, for example, for a second here, folks, and let's see if I can find the city of Münster in Germany. Here it is, to refresh your memory here. This is where the University of Wittenberg was located here in Saxony province here. University of Erfurt present there. The Diet of Worms is here, and up here is the city of Munster itself here. Alrighty, folks, we will come back for our final lecture here. It will not take us very long to get through that, I hope, anyway. Rather short lecture. We should be able to get through with that, in 25 minutes or something like that. No promises with that. Sometimes I get wrapped up in some subjects, and we may go a little bit further. Okay, thank you very much.